I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual.
起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
And I'll just remind everyone where we were before and what we're gonna talk about today. So we were able to cover pretty much everything in chapter 5. We divided up chapter 5 into 3 sections. You may recall that the first section focused on the concept of straw dogs. Straw dogs were created for rituals, and they were created dispassionately. That is, they were done for a purpose, not for emotional reasons. And when the rituals were done, they were discarded, also dispassionately. That is, they were discarded not because they were hated or disliked, but simply because their utilization had come to an end. Section 2, that we also covered last time, spoke of the metaphoric comparison between the Tao, heaven and earth, the space in between, with bellows. So the functioning of the Tao appears to be empty, like the inside of the bellows, and yet you can keep working it. You can continue to get blasts of air coming out of it to feed into the burning flames of a furnace. So it's never exhausted. And the more you use it, the more comes out of it. So that's a metaphor for the infinite resource that is the Tao. Lastly, this is where we ended up last time. We talked about the conclusion of chapter 5, the last 2 lines. And the last 2 lines, as I mentioned, were especially tricky because the characters that are used had meaning in ancient times that are no longer in use in modern Mandarin. So it's important to understand exactly what those ancient characters were and, compared to what they mean today. So as you can see in the translation, the next to last line talks about too many words, haste, and failure. And we have the character su, which in modern times, in modern Mandarin, will be counting, but in ancient times was accelerating, not counting, and therefore hasten. And then the last character of line 9, shou, in modern times, it just means poor or poverty, but in ancient times, it had a related meaning of failure, and failure, of course, is poverty is a failure of finance. So that's how the meanings are connected. So that line together, all the characters, when you string them together, talks about how when you use too many words, whether written or spoken, you simply accelerate your process to failure. So then that's what we were at, and then we started talking about the last line, to keep to the void, and I alluded to the different ways that this could be translated. So the last 2 lines are important enough, and we had a gap of 2 weeks between last meeting and today that I thought it'd be a good idea for us to take a small step back and just revisit the last 2 lines, make sure we all get that. There's actually a lot that can be said for the very last character. So I want to present to you all the different shades of meaning, all the different layers that we can extract out of it before we do the paraphrase for chapter 5. So a quick review toward the end of last time. I'm focusing first on the last 2 characters of line 9. So if you only know modern Mandarin, you would be thinking about this as counting and this as poor or poverty. But putting them together, you get something that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Count poverty, counting the number of poor people, what is that? Well, that's not what it means. So, as I mentioned, it actually means that you speed your way to failure or disaster or setbacks, road bumps, speeding toward collapse or disaster. So those that will be the negative consequence of using too many words. So when we put it all together, that's what we get. And you can see this at different levels. At the larger level of a kingdom, a nation, a country, at that level, 多言数穷, this means complex laws, burdensome regulations create loopholes and a massive bureaucracy in order to keep track of all the different rules and to enforce them, to mete out punishment when people do not fall in line and follow complex rules. And when the rules are complex enough, there are also increasing chances of people failing to follow the rules properly. If you are not in violation of one regulation, you violated some other one. And nobody knows what all of them are because there's so many of them. So that's what happens at the level of a kingdom of nations. So the advice that Lao Tzu will have for a king, an emperor, or a ruler would be to simplify. Make the laws easy for the people to understand and follow. Make the laws simple so that they can be more easily enforced. That's how you have the efficient functioning of a well-organized government. Now, you can reflect on every part of what I have just said to the personal level. So you can look at it in a couple of different ways. Number one, you can also live your life without burdensome rules that you set up for yourself and for other people around you. We all know the people that, have, they impose the kind of personality, domineering personality that impose many rules on other people. The effect is that they tend to alienate everyone around them, that when people can get away from them, they don't want to stick around. So when they have the opportunity to do so, they will put some distance between themselves and this person that's laying out the rules for everybody to follow. So pretty soon, there's nobody around for this domineering person to enforce any rules on anybody else. And at the other level, just at the personal level, just for you, if you use too many words, meaning you engage in a lot of gossip, rumor mongering, you talk a lot, well, you can't seem to shut up. Maybe you talk about your plans for the future, but never actually take any action. Well, that's symptomatic. That's the paradigm for guaranteeing your own failure in life, that you talk way more than you do. So when you put it all together, you get different layers of meaning, different levels of meaning, whether at the very large, at the kingdom level, or at the personal level. Let me say that when we dissect the very last line, we're going to get into quite a bit of modern Mandarin and Chinese culture. So, but those of you who are currently studying Chinese, this will probably be helpful because I'll talk a lot about idiomatic expressions. Chinese is full of everyday utilized idioms that are 4 characters, usually 4 characters, and this often presents a challenge for students. If you are not currently studying Mandarin, then see it as like a glimpse into the culture. You can oftentimes tell quite a bit about a particular culture just by the way that certain things get repeated, certain things get emphasized. So these are, I think, insights that you would not otherwise be able to obtain from other sources. So with that, let's talk about the first 2 characters here. You will probably be able to see that I have 不如 repeated down here to single them out. So in pinyin, 不 ru. So that's pretty close to the way it sounds in the original language, ru. What do these characters mean? So literally, two characters. The first character means no or not, and the second character means to compare. So not compare, it actually means cannot compare to or cannot be compared to. Meaning cannot compare to or it will be better to. So it's just like when you say something like, well, eating pizza at a restaurant cannot compare to eating pizza at home where you can be very comfortable, put your feet up on the sofa, you can, on the couch, you can be lazing around, you can do whatever you want, whereas you will not have that same freedom in a public place. So the cannot compare to means that it's not as good as, or that the alternative will be better. Then let's focus for a moment on the third character in the 10th line, in the last one, so. The pinyin suggests that it should be shall, but that's actually just one of the problems with pinyin. It's actually so, with the O sound. What does it mean? To hold to hang on to, or keep to something. To stay in or stay with something. So it can be used in all kinds of different situations. So hold on to what? Hang on to what? Stay with what? Stay with, hang on to, zhong. So all together, putting the four characters together, it says that rather than to talk too much, i.e. you use too many words, we should keep to zhong. And what does zhong mean? This is one of the simpler characters in Chinese. It's probably one of the first characters everybody learns when they begin to learn modern Mandarin. Usually it means center or middle. So let's go to the next slide and explore the meaning of that. So, zhong. And when you look at the pinyin, you may think that it's like, Kong, like the Gong Show, or King Kong, that it rhymes with that, or Hong Kong. That's not the way it sounds. That's not the way it actually sounds. It sounds more like zhong with the O sound. So again, pinyin may be a little bit misleading for native speakers. So in modern Mandarin, this means center or middle. So initially, looking at the sentence, it would suggest that the last line says, well, rather than to talk too much, it's better to keep to the middle, or it's better to hold on to the center. And indeed, that's oftentimes how this particular line is translated. But in the previous line, we noted that the last two characters of line 9 actually are not going with the modern Mandarin definition. So is it possible that this last character is actually not center or middle, but something else entirely? And indeed, that's what I'm saying. That's what the commentaries all say. So we'll get to that in just a moment. First, let me talk about how that character is sometimes used, or I should say oftentimes used. So here we have 中国. We have 中, the character that means center or middle, and then 国, we have the character for country or nation. So it literally means central nation, the nation that is central to in the world. And some people would also look at that as Middle Kingdom. So you've heard of the Middle Kingdom, 中国. But in ancient times, to the ancient Chinese themselves, when they spoke of themselves, they did not think of themselves as being in the middle of anything. It was actually a misunderstanding of the early Western scholars that looked at Zhongguo and thinking that, wow, the Chinese people, they must think that they are a kingdom between heaven and earth, and that's why it's the middle kingdom. Well, actually, Zhongguo began in ancient Chinese as simply Zhongyuan, Zhongtu, which is the central place, the central land, the central plain. It meant that the people there, the people who were of that land, thought of themselves as being in the center of everything, and rightfully so, because they occupied very fertile land that was easy to cultivate, very plentiful when it comes to agricultural products, and that generated tremendous wealth. That wealth was the foundation for a highly advanced civilization with highly developed art, poetry, literature, scholarship in every subject under the sun. So they thought highly of themselves. Every other places outside of the borders of ancient China, they saw that people were much more backward, that people were much more focused on survival issues rather than the finer things associated with the civilization. That is the reason why Zhongyuan, Zhongtu, these were considered to be like, center of the world, central to the world. And that's why Zhongguo is not, in fact, Middle Kingdom, but more like central nation. But today, it's not translated as anything but China. Whenever you see Zhongguo, that's all it is. It means China. But I thought I'd provide a little bit of historical context. So, just like Su Qiong of the previous line, in this ancient usage, it is also not exactly like modern Mandarin. There are actually quite a few translators who are native speakers of Mandarin, but who don't know ancient or classical Chinese, and therefore they will still translate that last line. They will still explain that last line as holding to the middle or holding to the center. And then they will generate a lot of explanations on why that is the accurate way to interpret. But in fact, so they become no different from, Western translators who also do not know ancient Chinese, and therefore use hold to the center or keep to the middle, like the path of moderation. And it seems to make a lot of sense because we're talking about the Tao. So the Tao of moderation should be central to the teachings. So it seems to make a lot of sense that it should be here, except for one factor. If you think about the previous line is talking about too many words, like speaking too much, talking too much, like a chatterbox, or having too many burdensome laws and regulations, too many rules. So keeping to the center or the middle is not something that you can compare to speaking too many words, too many written or spoken words. The opposite of too many words or too many rules and regulations will be quietness and simplicity. So that's actually not middle or central in the original context. What does it mean actually? Well, let's take a look. In this ancient usage, is actually synonymous with Chong. So this character you'll see is very, very similar to Zhong, except with the addition of the 3 dots to the left. That's this is, by the way, 1/2 of a character is called a radical. So the radical to the left is actually the radical for water. So 冲 usually in modern Mandarin it means to rinse or flush with water. In ancient times, it had the related meaning of emptiness, which is a reference to the Tao. Now, so let's hold on for 1 second. How is it a related meaning? Well, when you have a container that has, for instance, like a container for food, and you've got some leftover dirty stuff in there, you want to clean it, you want to empty it of the leftovers, you flush it with water, then you empty it of what you wanted to discard. That's the related meaning. So, 冲 no longer used in modern times to mean emptiness, but in ancient times, it had that related meaning of emptiness, which is a reference to the Tao. The Tao is empty. Everything comes from it, but there's nothing in it. And you can flip it around the other way too. There's nothing in the Tao, and yet everything comes from it. So the Tao is this essence of emptiness. Emptiness that is full of possibilities, full of infinite potentialities waiting to manifest in reality. So that's what that last character was originally supposed to be, synonymous with 冲, which meant emptiness. So when you put it together now, it makes more sense. Keeping to the emptiness of the Tao means that you should not be talking too much, that you should not have too many rules and regulations. So moving on. 手中, the true meaning of the last line is not exactly about holding to the center or the middle. It's a continuation of the previous line. It spoke of failure. The previous line spoke of failure as the result from too many words. So now you can begin to zero in on what it actually means and how and the reason why people get it wrong. So the Tao is not a thing. It's formless. You can't see it. And you can't hear it. It's soundless. It has no physical manifestation. It can be felt. It can be sensed, but never seen or heard. So originally, when I understood that, and looking at the previous line, I thought, so this character that's supposed to mean middle or center, I should translate it as silence or quiet. Why? Because I wanted to express the opposite of 多言, which means too many words, excessive words. Later, upon further reflection, I realized that to translate this way veers too much into interpretation. That is, I look at this character, which means emptiness, and then I interpret the emptiness to talk about silence and quiet, which is one of the characteristics of emptiness, but silence is not emptiness. Let me say that the other way, make it simpler. Emptiness is silence, because there's nothing to make any sound. So emptiness has silence as one of the characteristics, but emptiness and silence are actually two different things. So then my realization was that it would actually be better if I can translate it in a literal way. That is, the original says emptiness. I'm going to translate it as emptiness, or in my case, the void. And then refer to it in the notes for further in-depth understanding and say that, hey, everybody, when you hold on to the Tao, you would naturally speak less and do more. Okay, that would make a lot of sense. And that's better than too many words hastening your failure. That makes perfect sense. So that's the better way. So in later translations, I revised my own translation to change it from silence or quiet to the void. And that's because, one of the reasons because I feel like I need to keep my mind open to the possibility that I'm only human, I made a mistake. No, I need to correct that mistake. I know that not all authors feel this way. There are definitely authors who, once they have published the book, will defend it to the death. Every word, every character. Now that it's been published, it's the definitive authoritative version. It can never be changed. So luckily for me, I have the internet where I can continue to publish and where I can revise whatever is not optimal from what has been published. Okay, so my revised position is that zone should be translated as void or emptiness to convey the original intent as closely as possible. And when you say keeping to the void, that's just another way to say that you have to hold on to the Tao. You have to assume or emulate the characteristics of the Tao. That includes silence, quietness. It includes Wu Wei, which means unattached actions. And it means a whole bunch of other things, which we're going to get into one by one. So when you really understand Chapter 5, those who really understand this teaching will naturally tend toward talking less and doing more due to a clear view on the negative effects of too many words. What negative effects? Well, it 诉求, it accelerates toward failure. When you know that, you naturally don't want to use too many words. You want to reduce the number of words that you use to other people. Okay, so like I said, there are many cultural implications of this. It has implications other than reducing your chattiness. Number one, as I mentioned previously, it means simplicity. So if you've got too many rules, using many words, you want to streamline all of the rules into elegant principles. An elegant principle is something that's short, but encapsulates a lot. Just a few words to convey a world of meaning. So streamline. Number two, this also implies the integration of yin and yang. When you want to emulate the Tao contains both yin and yang in harmonious whole, and they work together to produce a great synergistic power. So what does that mean to integrate yin and yang? Well, here I provide one example. Let your right actions follow the right thoughts. Metaphor from the masters is the blind man and the cripple. That requires explanation. Let me explain. This goes more in depth. And sometimes the masters will assume that everybody already knows these examples and we won't talk about it too much. They just mention it. They just make references to it. But I think it's a fantastic example, great metaphor, great story, great visual image. So I want to explain it for everybody. So let's start out with the recognition that yin and yang. Yin is representing thoughts. Yang, the active principle, is representing actions. So yin will be what you think about but not put into action. Yang will be the action component, the dynamic. When you're just thinking, when you're just thinking thoughts, you're inactive. Your mind is moving, but your body is not moving. When you're acting, your body is moving. And it turns out we need both. We need both yin and yang. So the masters tell us a story, a metaphor about this house that is on fire, that is caught on fire, it's burning down, so it's a dangerous situation. In the house, there are two men. One man is sightless, he's blind, he can't see. So he can hear that in the house, there's the crackling sound of burning flames, There's the sound of things falling, as the house is being destroyed by the fire. So he knows that some of the pathways that he's used to are being blocked, but he can't really tell which pathways are blocked. He doesn't know which door will lead to safety. He can't see. The other man is not blind, not sightless, but he's legless. So sometimes he's referred to as lame, other times referred to as the cripple. But the legless man and the sightless man. So the legless man can see what's going on. Whoa, there's all these flames. The house is burning down. We got to run. We got to get out of here. But he doesn't have the legs to carry him out. His arms are too weak. He can't move. So he can see the danger, but he can't take any action. So then the two men, the sightless man and the legless man, they have to work together to get out of danger, to get out of the burning house. Unfortunately, the two were having an argument with one another. They were fighting, over food. So now they're mad at one another. They're like, I'm not talking to you, you ate my food. I'm not talking to you, So they don't get along. So neither one wants to break the silence with the other part. So they're not communicating. So even though the house is burning down, they are stubbornly holding on to their conflict with one another and not talking to one another. So then both will die in flame as the house is burning down around them. So clearly, when we see an example like this, we can tell that, they should just get past their difficulties with one another. They should talk and say that, hey, listen, we're in a bad situation. You gotta carry me on your back, So the blind man, what he really has to do is to carry the legless man on his back. The legless man can see, and then he can say, okay, we gotta go forward. Okay, turn right. Okay, there's a door to the left. Go left. Okay, by working together, they can get out. They can get out of danger. Then, when they're outside the house, they can turn around and watch the house burning down, but without them in it. So, what does all this mean? Let's break it down. Let's break down the story. First, the burning house. The burning house is oftentimes used in Eastern thought as a metaphor for the world or life. Could be your life. What does it mean? Well, we know that living in this world, we all go through suffering, we age, and we die. So, in a way, this life that you live is like a burning house. After a while, the house is going to burn down, meaning your life is going to be over. And in the meantime, it's going to burn you, which means suffering. So, how do you liberate yourself from suffering? Well, that's the focus of Eastern thought, like Buddhism. So in fact, the Sakyamuni Buddha had often used the burning house as a metaphor when he told his stories, and he would tell, probably one of the primary stories in Buddhism. So when he talks about the burning house, and that there's a wise old man who sees that the house is burning down, and he wants to get little kids out of the house. But the little kids are focused on their toys. They're focused on their games. And when the wise old man is saying, hey, we're in danger, let's get out, they ignore the wise old man and they continue playing their games and with their toys. That's a metaphor for someone who has awakened to the greater reality of suffering in the world. The wise old man wanting the little kids to put away their toys and their games. The toys and games represent our material competition with one another in the physical world. Like when we try to advance in society, when we're competing with one another, that's the games that little kids play, basically. We're so focused on that, we don't really sense the danger of the burning house or mortality and suffering. And we have to be awakened to the greater reality. And Sakyamuni Buddha, 2,500 years ago, when he taught, he said that, the old man would need to lure the kids out and say that, oh, listen, I prepared a whole bunch of, carriages drawn by these beautiful animals. Come see, come see. So the little kids come out and wow, there are these carriages, they're going to take us away from this place. And then that is what the Shakyamuni calls the lesser, the lower level teachings that will get people interested in the higher level teachings of Buddhism so that they can become awakened to the greater reality. So the burning house is oftentimes used in Eastern thought, including Buddhism, to represent life, the world, the fact that everything is going downhill. The moment you're born, you start getting older. At some point, you have to depart this world. In the meantime, you're going to go through fatigue, setbacks, people doing mean, horrible things. You're going to go through a lot of suffering. That's the burning of the flames. So your house is burning down. Now, outside of Buddhism, when you come back into the realm of the Tao, the house is burning. You've got the sightless man and the legless man. What do those represent? Well, the legless man who can see represents the mind or your thoughts. You can understand, think, reason. You can be taught the greater truth, the philosophies. Those are like seeing things, understanding things. So that is the man who has eyes but not legs. That's pure intellect, pure mentality. The blind. So on the other hand, the blind man who can't see but whose limbs are intact and can move, that represents action in the world. So that's yang. That's the yang principle. Whereas the man who doesn't have legs but has eyes, that's the yin principle. That's thought. That's the mind. That's the mental aspect. When you've got the blind man, the sightless man, and the legless man arguing with one another, that is like your internal spiritual landscape having a conflict with itself. That means you're conflicted. Or it can mean that you know what to do. Like your legless man with the eyes or thoughts, you know what you have to do. You have to get out that way. But you can't communicate that with the blind man who has legs, the action, because, well, I'm procrastinating. I know I really should be cultivating the Tao, but I'll start tomorrow. No, I'll start next week. No, I'll start next month. Okay. So you have a lack of harmony internally. Therefore, that's represented by the legless man fighting with the sightless man. So how you liberate yourself from the burning house, from suffering, mortality, well, you have to have internal harmony. That will be represented by the legless man and the sightless man talking to one another, communicating. And hey, listen, we're in a bad situation. We got to do something right now. You don't know where to go? That's okay. I can see where we have to go. So carry me and I will guide you. So your thoughts should be guiding your action. So the thoughts, knowing what to do, those in Buddhism will be called the right thoughts, and your legs to carry you to the place that the right thoughts are pointing to, like, go right, go left, go straight. Those will be the right actions. So right thoughts will lead to right action. That is the recipe of getting out of the burning house. So the blind man and the cripple, they basically have to work together, meaning you've got to have internal harmony in order to make any of this work. So far, so good? So a different point, number 3, to hold to the middle. Well, I mentioned that a lot of translators, a lot of authors who don't know ancient Chinese, they'll just look at zong as the middle or the center. So then they'll talk about holding to the center. Well, in fact, when you hold on to the Tao, you have to practice moderation as well. And that's one of the characteristics. That's one of the teachings, primary teachings in the Tao. So earlier in this particular chapter, we talked about the bellows. The bellows is what you use to pump air into the furnace. So think of the bellows as a metaphor for speaking. What does that mean? Well, when we say keep to the quiet or the silence of the Tao, if you just translate it like quietness or silence like I did, then you give the mistaken impression that when you practice the Tao, you should say nothing. Well, that's not true. In the middle of this particular chapter, it talks about the bellows, the action of the bellows, pumping air. So think about what that implies. If you connect that with speaking, when you press down on the bellows, that is speaking. Air is coming out, and you're causing the flame in the furnace to burn brighter, hotter. But when you're relaxing your grip, meaning you don't need air for that particular moment, then that's it. The bellows goes to quietness. The bellows will not need to produce additional air at that time. What that says is that a Tao cultivator will be speaking when it is necessary and proper to do so, and when that time is passed, he or she will have no problem quieting down and say nothing further. So the paradigm in Tao is not to be quiet all the time. It's not to take a vow of silence. It is rather to say what is necessary and then come to a natural stopping point. That's the Tao. So, and that's moderation. That's number 3. So it's not just moderation, it's also about centering. So zhong can be the middle, moderation, or it can be the center. And here we go, centering yourself. Why is it important to center yourself? Well, the simple reason, as you will see here, is that you are far less effective when your mind is scattered in all different directions. Because not all of your mental resources are focused and concentrated on the one aspect of life that you need to focus on the one thing that you need to do, on the one goal, on the one accomplishment that you are looking at. Okay, so centering yourself. If you have gone through the initiation ritual, you will recognize this right away. Those who have, grammatical mistake there, have received the Tao will recognize the above as holding to the mystic portal. So that's what this is based on. When you hold to the mystic portal, the scattered parts of your mind will automatically come back in so you can center yourself. That's when you become much, much more effective. You are focusing the power of your mind like a coherent laser beam. So when we talk about right thoughts leading to right actions, so think about the legless man, thoughts, can see, leading right actions, the blind man who's got legs to escape from the burning house, right thoughts leading to right actions, spring from the practice of wordless true sutra, which connects you to your Buddha nature, remember? And it's something that we use to get us back on the right track. So when you feel like you're lost, you have to do both of the above. You have to focus your mind on the mystic portal, and then you have to use the wordless true sutra to help yourself, to give yourself the strength to get back on track. Very powerful tools. I think a lot more powerful than many people realize. So that's it for the theory. Now let's talk about practical application. In practical applications, this is where I can also reference many different aspects of Chinese culture so you can get a feel for how this is oftentimes used. So first, I want to introduce you to this concept. These are all simplistic characters, simple, oftentimes used characters. 无名火, what is that? Wu means no or not having any. Ming means name. Huo means fire. And we'll see the Huo as fire quite a few times. So this means nameless fire. It's a metaphoric expression meaning anger. So when you see something that you don't like, maybe you just received, poor service at a restaurant, or you're driving on the freeway, you're getting cut off, whatever the reason may be, you're feeling anger. That's when Wu Ming Huo, the nameless fire, is suddenly burning up. So that means anger. So when that fire burns, you get this, 火烧功德林. What does that mean? It means fire burning the forest of merit. So 火, that means fire. 烧 means to burn. 功德, together, that means merit. Merit is what you accumulate when you practice virtue. When you are doing good deeds, when you're saying encouraging words to other people, when you're helping, assisting others, you accumulate virtue for yourself. 功德, you accumulate merit. 林, that's a forest. It is as if with every act of virtue that you practice, with every good deed that you do, you are planting the seed in a forest of merit. And in time, these seeds grow up to be beautiful, strong trees in this forest. And the more you do, the more the trees in the forest will thrive. But when you are angry, when the nameless fires is burning, it's sort of like the forest fire, what you have spent a lot of time on, planting the seeds, caring for the trees so they grow tall and strong. Suddenly, the fire is burning and it's burning down the forest. All that merit that you have created before, it's being burned, it's turned into, charred ash, basically. So it's a metaphoric expression describing how anger leads to danger in a spiritual sense. So for the forest of merit to burn, that's danger. That's a spiritual danger. And let me also point out, anger and danger differ by one character only, by one letter only, the letter D. So it's very easy for anger to take you to danger in a spiritual sense. So how does one handle the above? This is where the practical situation comes in, because I know for a fact that we all encounter the situation every day. Every day, there's always something that happens that will cause the nameless fire to start burning. Ooh, that politician, I can't stand that guy. Or that person at work, who was always trying to sabotage me. I look at that person, I get angry, or whatever the case may be. You encounter situations, you encounter obstacles, you get angry. And when you get angry and you allow that flame to burn out of control, it begins to consume all the good things that you have done. That's the forest of merit. So how do you handle it? How do you avoid having the fire burn down your forest? Well, step one, you have to center yourself with a mystic portal. You have to put your thoughts there. Hold to the Tao, meaning to center yourself with the mystic portal, and then recite the wordless truth sutra to bring yourself back to the right path. And if in that moment, pardon me, if in that moment you are able to hold the hand seal, then so much the better. So that's how you handle the nameless fire. So in the culture, in Chinese culture, there's a lot of 成语. These are 4-character idioms that convey a lot of meaning. So I'll go through them quickly with you. You'll find that they're actually quite simple. People who study Chinese find them to be quite difficult, but they're actually simple. And they're easy to understand. So And I'll just give you a few examples. There's only a handful, like half a dozen examples. So 祸从口出, this is used all the time by modern day Mandarin speaking people. 祸从口出, it means disaster comes out of the mouth. So it's exactly the same meaning as the line from this chapter of the Tao Te Ching. 多言数穷, 祸从口出, disaster comes out of the mouth. Speaking too much accelerates you to failure. Same idea. So another one that's the same. 言多必失, too many words must lead to loss. So words, excessive, must, loss. Those are the 4 characters. Too many words must lead to loss. That again expresses the same thing. So why these different expressions instead of the original from 2,500 years ago, 多言数穷? Well, because the last 2 characters, the meaning of the last 2 characters are no longer used in modern Mandarin. So when you say 多言数穷 in modern Mandarin, you are less likely to encounter people who understand what you mean. But if you use a simpler expression like disaster comes out of the mouth, 祸从口出, or 言多必失, too many words must lead to loss, everybody understands exactly what you mean. And in fact, for the Chinese, they will further extend that in a way that I think is easy to understand and will really make the point. Let me show you what I mean. 多说多错. Many words lead to many mistakes. You can tell that you've got 多, excessive, repeated twice. So the more you talk, the more mistakes you potentially can make. The more you will say things that you regret later. So 多说多错. The more you talk, the worse things tend to get. Remember that. What's the opposite? 少说少错. When you talk less, when you use fewer words, it leads to fewer mistakes. So just by talking less, you end up with less regret, less to apologize for, less of a mess to clean up. And you make a mess when you say a lot of wrong things and you have to apologize for them. So it's better to actually have less words than too many words. When you extend that further, you get to the last one. 不说不错. No talking, no mistakes. This is the realm of the Tao. Remain quiet in order to observe and learn. Speak only when necessary and appropriate. That's the Tao. So, real-life example, you heard Bill talk a little bit today about how he and I are both in the technology industry. That's true. Let me show you guys what this looks like. What is this? This is a kind of software. This is an operating system. It is used primarily by elite hackers and cybersecurity experts. They have a model, which is at the bottom here. Now it's kind of small, so I've typed it out for you separately. That model of elite hackers and cybersecurity experts says, from here, the quieter you become, the more you are able to hear. So how is it that these elite hackers and cybersecurity experts can accomplish what they do? How can they penetrate into systems? When they conduct their penetration testing, how can they do the amazing things that they can do and say, hey, look, I've uncovered all this information that you thought was protected. Well, it's because they become very quiet, so they can hear more and make use of what they hear. Okay, so that's a practical example from my own life. That's what I do every day. So I'm glad that it has such a fitting reflection of the Tao. A lot of times I tell people that I use the Tao all the time in my daily work, in my life. And they ask me for an example. Well, there you go. That's a perfect example of the Tao. Ready now for the paraphrase. We have probably just enough time before we have to do the summary for today. So our purpose for the paraphrase is to demonstrate complete understanding by expressing the original meaning in our own words. Okay, let's start out with the first section. Remember, it's about the straw dogs. So how do we convey that heaven and earth regard myriad living things as straw dogs, and how sages also regard everybody as straw dogs? Here's what I would like to offer. Nature functions without human emotion. When life is created, it is not due to love. When life ends, it is not due to peace. It is as if all living things are straw dogs used in a ritual. Observing this, the sages also do their work in the same impartial way. They help the people around them, but it's not because they like some better than others. They do so only because helping others is what they do naturally. So, referencing back to nature itself, nature creates life. Nature eventually life leads to death, and this all happens because it is what nature does naturally. Next, we have a section on comparing the space between heaven and earth to bellows with the endless functioning. The more you use, the more you get. So how do we convey that? Here's what I would like to suggest. Consider the space between heaven and earth like the emptiness inside a bellows. There seems to be nothing in it. The more you work the bellows, the more air comes out. Similarly, the never-ending movement of heaven and earth creates the wind, the clouds, rain, snow, and all other weather manifestations. The more time passes, the more we see. This is the Tao. It functions without fuss, without noise, and the wonders never cease. Lastly, let's get to the conclusion here. Too many words hasten failure cannot compare to keeping to the void. So now you know that keeping to the void is keeping to the Tao, and that implies silence, quietness, moderation, yin and yang, integration, harmony, wu wei, all kinds of good stuff. First and foremost is about being quiet, because the quieter you are, the more you can hear. So here's the paraphrase. People, on the other hand, tend to waste words and achieve little. It will be better to emulate the Tao. If we can hold on to its principles, we too can accomplish everything without fuss, without noise. So in comparing the Tao with most people, people seem like the very opposite. The Tao doesn't say anything, but accomplishes everything. People seem to say everything and accomplish nothing. So if we can become more like the Tao, we become the counterexample from most other people. You can then accomplish a great deal while saying very little. So that is the paraphrase for Tao Te Ching, Chapter 5. Now, let's do the summary. The thoughts inspired by 5. So I want to take the very last line and expand on it further. Last time, we talked about it a bit. So from the previous summary, practice holding to the void. Mindfully redirect your energy from talking to doing, and notice how much more you live in the moment compared to everyone around you. So here, what I'm doing is that I'm focusing on the primary meaning of the Tao being silent. So the idea is that a lot of times as we go through life, people talk about how silence is golden, but they only say it. They don't actually practice it. When they get together with friends, They're still, doing a lot of chatting, a lot of idle chatter, a lot of complaints. So complaining to all their friends about every little thing under the sun. So I want to challenge everybody to redirect their energy rather than to talk a lot. Redirect that energy to actions. And if you keep this up for a while, you will notice how much more you can get done for yourself, for the dreams and the visions that you have compared to everyone around you. So that's challenge number 1. Moving on. I want to be sure that everyone knows this. Holding to the void is not a vow of silence. I am definitely not saying that after we're done talking about chapter 5, you should, go through life without saying anything. That will be horrible. Sometimes you still have to say something. So in the Tao paradigm, the idea is to speak just enough and stop naturally. There's going to be times when you realize that you don't need to say anything more, that a word, maybe a gesture, an expression, a smile, a gentle touch, those will be enough to communicate your intent, your feeling. And in a situation like that, no need to say anything else. So the challenge for you is to speak just enough and then stop naturally. Last one, final challenge. This week's practice, refrain from being the one to initiate conversation. See if it's possible to simply enjoy the silence. Notice how being devoid of words can make people uncomfortable. So, especially in the Western world, people are oftentimes uncomfortable when things are too quiet. And they feel like they have to say something to fill the silence with words. When you get together with friends, pay attention to how that mechanism works. Notice how if nobody says anything, quickly things will become awkward. People feel uncomfortable. They get fidgety. They're like, okay, so now what? Now I should say something, because you're not comfortable with the silence. I want to challenge you to be different from everybody around you. Virtually everybody is this way. But see if you can train yourself to embrace the silence, enjoy the silence. If you have really good friends and you're around them, you don't actually need to say anything. You know who they are. You know how they are. They know who you are. They know how you are. So it may not be necessary to do anything other than to enjoy the proximity of their presence. Literally enjoy the company and not be having a chat, not be passing on some juicy gossip or rumors that you have heard. Is it possible? Can it be done? Can you be the one, you can't control other people. So if they initiate a conversation, I want you to still react naturally. They ask you about certain things. So what are you planning to do over the weekend? I don't want you to just, shut up and say nothing. I want you to react naturally. But all you have to do is to not be the one to start a conversational topic. That's the challenge. See what happens. When there's a silence, avoid giving in to the temptation to say something. Avoid, recognize the discomfort in yourself. Oh, nobody's saying anything. Boy, this is awkward. I should say something, right? Okay, well, in that moment, stop yourself and let the silence continue. So do that for a couple of weeks, and I will see everyone again in 2 weeks' time, and I'm looking forward to hearing how you do with these challenges.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬 3鞠躬，持家各位点传11鞠躬，协班1鞠躬。Well done, everybody. Thank you so much.